like finding a professional that's out there may feel like top secret news because they don't publicize themselves, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, like they do in the Grammys or the Emmys or the Oscars or all those other award shows. There's another piece of the pie, another piece of your financial pie that probably seems a little bit elusive as well, and that is your credit. Welcome back to Brashonomics. I'm Ben Brashen. Lucky enough to have David Murphy join us, Director of Operations with the Credit Insider Club with over 20 years experience in credit repair. David, how are you, my man?
Hey, I'm doing good. Kind of nippy out there.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess that's what happens as you get into winter, huh? But so let's it's kind of fun, you get these big stars in the radio studio and whatnot, and people like different types of music, and a lot of people like different types of their finances. People like money, people like real estate. Most people nobody really loves their credit. Nobody's like, God, I like credit so much, but it's such a huge underlying factor of all of those things. And, there's a lot of people who maybe have had some tough times and are looking to maybe improve that score because it can ultimately improve their finances, improve their real estate situation. There's so many things, insurance, their car loans.
The higher the credit score, the lower the interest rates.
Yeah, and which is, pretty direct correlation, yeah?
And nobody loves their credit score unless they know they have an 850.
Right. And how many people do you know that have an 850?
Maybe one.
Yeah?
Trust fund, baby.
Trust fund, baby? It's a good deal.
And no credit card debt.
Yeah. Well, how does somebody go about, if there's the opportunity is, I suppose, there for anybody at any point in time to improve their credit, should they want to take the steps to do that? What are some of those steps that maybe somebody can take to improve their credit and, as you said, lower their interest rates?
First step is to know exactly who reports on your credit report. So that means that you need to get a copy of your credit report. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and get a free copy. You can go to a mortgage company, pay for one, and they'll give you a compendium of all three credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. But you need to know who shows up on your credit report. That way, it will allow you to be able to pay your bills in a timely fashion so that you know exactly who needs to be paid on time each month. Something like your, let's say your PSE, Puget Sound Electric. That's not going to show up on your credit report. Of course, if you don't pay it, they're going to send you to collection, and then it will. But what I'm trying to say there is that you can be 30 to 45 days late in paying that type of bill, cell phone bill, but you can't be late on your plastic, your credit cards, Bank of America, MasterCard, Visa, American
Mortgages
Express,
is a big
mortgage,
one. That's
cars, student loans. So you need to know who shows up on your credit report.
So that first step, as you're saying, is really get a copy of it. So you at least know what you're dealing with. It's hard to improve something if you don't know what you're improving.
Think of your credit report as your business resume. People are going to be making financial decisions based on what they see. Okay? Secondly, know what your credit score is. And this is where, with the internet, it gets a little gobbly-goopy.
Gobbly-goopy.
And that is if it doesn't say FICO score and it says credit score, it's not a FICO score. It generally will wind up being a VantageScore, which is a consumer-based score, whereas the FICO is a commercially based score. So there's a little difference in the structure of those scores, but you need to be aware of what your score is.
And so real quick, because I know we have 10 more to get into, but what is a good score? What's a bad score? What's a horrible score? And as you already said, the 850 is the prize in the sky.
Well, I mean, if you want A money, meaning the lowest interest rates for a mortgage, they're going to want 720 and above, okay? The old days, meaning 2007, 2008, before the debacle of the financial institutions went down, you could get away with having a 620 and still getting a decent score. Those days are over. You want at least a 680 to walk in and get a decent rate, but you're going to get a better rate if it's 720 and above. Horrible scores, anything below 600 is not deemed
Good. Right. But I mean, you can get way lower than 600.
Oh, sure. You can go down to 350. That's the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. And so once you find out your score and you kind of know what's reporting, what are some of those next steps then to, I guess, improve your credit if you need it?
Well, certainly, again, you're identifying who needs to be paid. Who needs to be paid on time? Just because you pay all your bills on time doesn't mean you're going to wind up with a good credit score. You want to make sure that you have no collections, judgments, or tax liens. And if you do, make sure they're paid and zeroed out. That would position us to be able to get it deleted off your credit report. The kiss of death is if you've got a parking ticket from downtown Seattle and it
Alliance
says
One.
Alliance One, baby, $64. You know, no one outside of Seattle knows that that's a parking ticket. So if you can't pay a parking ticket, they're not going to loan you money. So you want to make sure that all these accounts are zeroed out, and you can.
It's funny that you say it that way, because from what you're saying, it's like, look, if you can't pay a parking ticket, we're not going to loan you money. And a lot of other people, the other side of the coin, is, gosh, it's a parking ticket. But there's kind of that's one of those places where there's I suppose it's not exactly looked at equally from both sides of the fence. Like, somebody misses their mortgage payment, it's very obvious. Like, look, you're not making a big payment.
Right.
But gosh, you couldn't pay a parking ticket. And then the other side of it is, well, it's a parking ticket.
You need to be very close watching on your bills, your credit report. Even if you have perfect credit, I suggest that you pull up a credit report every 6 months.
Well, that's like insurance, right? I mean, making sure it still is perfect.
Sure. And, of course, with biggest white-collar crime right now is identity theft. You need to make sure that all those addresses, phone numbers, everything that's on there is correct.
Yeah. Okay, so then you got to pay your bills on time, pay your Alliance One parking tickets for those of you guys downtown who, and quarters aren't even an excuse anymore because they all take credit cards now. I remember you used to go, I don't have any quarters, and none of the stores would trade you out quarters for like $1. So you have to run in and thing would expire.
Well, the city did exactly, they blueprinted what Portland was doing. So do you remember the old days where you used to pull into a meter that still had money on the meter?
Yeah, it was
Can't do
brilliant.
that. Can't do that anymore. Everybody has to pay.
Yeah, it's smart.
So
Remember the little red thing like buzzed up, and you turn the nut. Anyways, it's a whole nother topic of conversation. Okay, so, you pay your bills on time. Maybe you pay for your parking in advance so you don't get those tickets. What are some other big keys?
pay down on your plastic. That is probably the biggest key of all, because FICO is represented primarily 35% on history and 30% on what you owe. That represents almost, 65% of the FICO score. Plastic, the higher your debt with credit cards, the lower your credit score is going to become. It also depends upon, what your high balance compared to your credit limit is. So if, let's just say, $1,000 card, okay, your best bet is to keep that under $300, and it's not going to hurt your credit score. You start getting in excess of 70% of what the card has on it as far as the limit. Now your score is going to drop because you're using up your available credit. So the advice would be to pay down on your credit cards. If you're going to throw extra money at something, don't make an extra car payment. Don't make an extra mortgage payment. Pay down the credit card. That's the best idea, is to lower that, and it will help your FICO score.
And then I guess also you'll have less debt.
Yes.
It might help your financial life too. What? So
one of the other things is that at the first of the year, people are sitting there watching the Rose Bowl, and they're saying, this year, I'm going to take care of my credit. I'm gonna get a high score. Unfortunately, they close out a lot of accounts that maybe they don't use as much, okay? Department store cards. However, When you do that, you're erasing history. And as I just stated, 35% of the FICO score is history. So if you're closing older accounts, you are going to drop your score instead of up your score.
David Murphy joins us, Director of Operations with Credit Insider Club. David, we have a few minutes before we do have to go to break. Let's go. What else other than, what are some of the other big ones?
Here's another problem that consumers run into is they hire companies, to do consolidations and let them pay off their bills. We'll get you to the point where you're out of debt within 2 to 3 years. Problem is that if they're not making the minimum payments on your account, then you could wind up looking like you filed bankruptcy. An example of this is you've got a bunch of bills, they add them all up, and then they tally out who they should pay off. So if you have a minimum payment to Nordstrom where you're paying them $25 a month, and they're saying, hey, we can cut the interest rate off this, but we're only going to pay them $20 a month, you wind up getting a 30-day late because you're not making the minimum. So be wary of these companies out there that say they're going to help you get debt-free. I try to educate my clients so that they do it themselves. Negotiate collections yourself, because it's not a nice feeling having to talk to collection agencies. And hopefully you don't want to go through that.
Yeah, well, I would hope, unless you're not paying your parking tickets, right? David, what are a couple more of those on that list?
Well, besides settling your own collections, you can do the same with tax liens and judgments. You got to make sure that they're zeroed out, because there's no way we're going to be able to get something like that off a credit report if there's a balance on there. Because whether it's 2 months or 2 years, the likelihood is it's going to come back on the credit report, and that's a Band-Aid approach. One of the things you also need to be aware of are these 0% interest credit cards, where a lot of people say, okay, well, I've got 16 to 18% interest, I'll just transfer it onto a 0% interest. That's only usually good for like 6 to 9 months, and then suddenly it kicks in and it's like 18%. If you miss a payment on any credit card, your credit cards can be jacked up to 29.9%.
I mean, that's like mafia money lending rates, isn't it?
It is mafia rates.
And David, I'm excited to hear this last one, especially coming off of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, because it seems that everybody has gone out and spent a boatload of money over the last few days. What is that number one thing that you think is a great way to help people understand how they can really help their credit?
Try this. Go a week without spending money. Does that sound impossible? Could you imagine not having coffee for 7 days? There's a lot of people going to have headaches.
Well, I mean, you can make your own coffee at home.
Certainly.
I mean, you're still going to eat for those 7 days.
I'm saying don't go out to dinners, bring your own lunch, see how much you can save and put aside that beer after work, that extra latte.
Just make sure you stock up before you start, right?
See how much you're spending out of pocket that could go towards debt, and lowering your debt ratio, that ups your FICO score.
Is it, and we do have to go to break here, but I think that's a really interesting concept, because part of credit, I think, also is a habit. It's the habit of paying your cards, and that's what people want to see, is a habit of being on time with your payments. Part of the habit also of getting rid of your debt is not spending money you don't have.
That's right.
And if you're not...
But that's the American way. You're supposed to have 3 to 5 Visa cards. All right.
And they promote that. I mean, you got a better credit score if you have more open, not if you don't.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh man.
If you only have 1 to 2, it's really deemed a negative. But if you have more than 5, it's deemed a negative. So the balance point is 3 to 5.
As always, different forces pulling in different directions. David, thanks so much for joining us. Stick around for the end of the show. When we come back, Ramona Jones is going to join us. We'll be right back after this break.